you all ready next week to go back to having both A and B group in here? It's going to be so crowded. There will literally be one more person in here. Sometimes. And we might get two. Caitlin might come back to in person. Okay, so let's go over this. So we want to simplify this one by factoring. So if we do that, one way you can think about this problem is to use U substitution like we did on Monday and let U be secant theta. In which case this problem could be written as U squared minus 1. It might be easier to see how that factors in this form because you'll notice that this is a perfect square then, and 1 is also a perfect square. Square root of 1 is 1. So this is just a difference of squares, which factors into U plus 1 and U minus 1. And you can check your work really quickly. U times U is U squared. U times negative 1 would be negative U, but positive 1 times U is positive U. So the negative U and the positive U cancel out, which is why there's no middle term. And then 1 times negative 1 is negative 1. So if we then substitute back, this will factor into secant theta plus 1 times secant of theta minus 1. Okay. Okay. Today, we're not really doing actually anything new. We're just doing harder problems like we did in 5.1. The prompt is slightly different. We're verifying trig identities, which means we're basically going to take a complicated expression and simplify it to show that it equals another trig expression. So same steps, you're going to use your algebra skills to combine like terms, factor, distribute. If that doesn't work, try to get everything in terms of sine and cosine, and then simplify again. If that doesn't work, try to use one of your identities. If you have a trig function squared, use the Pythagorean identity. If you have a pi over 2 as part of your angles, use the cofunction identity. If you have a negative angle, use your even odd identities. So same steps as we were doing in 5.1. The only difference is we know what the answer should be. The answer should be sine squared. All right, so let's review how to do that. There are a lot of different ways you can start this problem. I will tell you the easiest is probably just to go ahead and divide these. Because secant squared divided by secant squared is just 1. All right, I think I have this. I could combine these back again. That seems like that would be kind of pointless. That would reverse what we just did. So instead, the next thing I do is try to get everything in terms of sine and cosine. So what is 1 over secant? Secant is the reciprocal of which trig function? Sine, cosine, or tangent? I should have, hold on. Okay, you keep looking in your notes. I'm gonna pull up that other slide that had all the stuff on it. That way we can refer back to it throughout this lesson. Secant is the reciprocal of cosine. Cosine is the same as 1 over secant. I think if I hit pair deck this, it'll make it bigger. So secant is the same as 1 over cosine. You launch. So then 1 over secant squared would be the same as cosine squared. That's your reciprocal identity. Okay, whenever you see a trig function squared, you will use the Pythagorean theorem. If you look, what Pythagorean theorem has cosine in it? It's down here. Sine squared plus cosine squared is 1. So if sine squared plus cosine squared is 1, then that means if I subtract cosine squared from both sides, that means sine squared is just 1 minus cosine squared. And hey, look, that's the same thing I have right here, which means 1 minus cosine squared of theta is really just sine squared of theta. And oh my gosh, that's what I was trying to get as my answer. Yay. Okay, let's have you try one. Try this one. Again, there's a lot of different ways you can start this problem. I'll give you 3 minutes and then we'll go over it. I suppose. And you know what, Ty? You could have one in my physics class. That's yours. Good. I don't give those out for just anybody. How is physics this year without Mr. Rep?
It's okay.
Okay, good.
I guess you can teach me better for chemistry.
It looks like she had people signed up. I don't think that's it for your year, it'd be next year, but had people signed up for AP Calc, the AP Calc test, which
Oh, yeah.
Rob never did. He had a negative opinion about AP classes in the College Board. Which is actually very weird because that's the same thing with the person I took over for, Miss Campbell. She did not have anyone really do the AP Calc test. All right, who's got an idea of what I could do first? No? No? Well, we have a trig function squared, right? Let's do a Pythagorean identity. What Pythagorean identity has sine squared in it? Same one, sine squared plus cosine squared is 1. And hey, look at that, sine squared plus cosine squared is 1. Sine squared plus cosine squared, that's just 1. Pythagorean identity. Okay, all right. So again, there's not really anything I can factor out, combine like terms, distribute, anything like that. So then the second thing I always try is get things in terms of sine and cosine. So again, tell me, what is 1 over secant squared? 1 over secant is? It's cosine. That's your reciprocal identity. 1 over secant is cosine. So then this is cosine. So then what I can write is instead of 1 over secant squared, that's just, oh, whoa, not equals 1. Who wrote that? Okay, is cosine squared over cosine squared. Right, instead of 1 over secant, I'll put the cos, that's the same as cosine squared. So that goes up top. But what is cosine squared divided by itself? 1. That's division. Okay. See, these aren't so bad in the sense that, getting sunburned on 90% of your body is better than 100%, right? Not so bad. Not so bad at all. Let's do some more. Look at this one. Look at that. All right. So the trick for this one is, since we are verifying these, the other trick that you can do is you can pick which side you want to work with and then make it look like the other side. I will tell you, you always generally want to do the more complicated side because it's easier to condense stuff than it is to expand it. So actually for this problem, we're going to use the right side. And again, the first thing I'm going to do for any of these problems is try to use my algebra skills first. So I know I want to get this down to a single term, which means I need to combine these two fractions. So if I want to add these two fractions together, then I need a common denominator. So to get a common denominator, I will multiply this one by 1 plus sine. And the other fraction, top and bottom, by 1 minus sine. The nice thing about this, though, is 1 plus sine and 1 minus sine are conjugates. So they actually multiply really nicely. And the numerator, 1 times 1 plus sine, is just 1 plus sine. That's easy peasy lemon squeezy. And then the denominator, it's not much harder to multiply these together. 1 times 1 is 1. Well, then here's the part where the fact that this is conjugates makes this easier. 1 times negative sine would be negative sine. But 1 times positive sine would be positive sine. Negative sine plus a positive sine cancels out. And then sine times negative sine would be negative sine squared. So if you remember that shortcut, you can multiply conjugates together by just squaring each term. 1 times 1 and sine squared, and then write the difference, 1 minus sine squared. All right, on the right side, second term, similar idea. 1 times 1 minus sine is 1 minus sine. And again, it's going to be a common denominator. So the answer will be 1 minus sine squared. Okay. Now we have common denominators. We can add these together and actually add together really nicely. 1 plus 1 is 2. Sine plus negative sine is nothing. Cancel out. Okay, I think I have done as much algebra as I can. We're now running into identities. I need to get everything in terms of sine and cosine. Wait, it already is in terms of sine and cosine. So now I look. Do I have a trig function squared? Yes, I do. So that means I'm going to use a Pythagorean identity. The one that has sine in it is this first one here. So if sine squared plus cosine squared is 1, then I can get this Pythagorean identity to actually match my problem right here if I subtract sine squared from both sides. Then we would get that cosine squared is 1 minus sine squared. And hey, 1 minus sine squared, that's what I got right here. So then this is 2 over cosine squared. And then, hey, I want the answer to be secant squared. And what's the reciprocal of cosine? 1 over cosine would be 1 over cosine is secant, right? They're reciprocals of each other. Cosine is 1 over secant, secant is 1 over cosine. So then this is, okay, I ran out of room, so I'm going to write it right here. This is 2 secant squared, and that is a reciprocal identity. Okay, questions about that? Let's have you try one then. And by try one, okay, I'm going to skip this one, I think. This is exactly the same as the one we just did, just cosine and sine are switched. So let's have you try this one. And I will tell you the first step you want to do, the easiest way to do this problem is Pythagorean identities first. Use your Pythagorean identities on this one and this one first. Okay? Give you 3 minutes to try it on your own, and then we'll go. Okay, let's go over this. All right, what is tangent squared plus 1? Secant squared. That's our Pythagorean identity. Secant squared. What is cosine squared minus 1? Okay, this one you gotta have to manipulate. So remember, sine squared. Oh, plus cosine squared is 1. So if I want to get cosine squared minus 1, then I would need to minus the 1 over here, and then I would need to minus the sine over there. So then I would get cosine squared minus 1 on the left, and then on the right, negative sine squared. So cosine squared minus 1 is negative sine squared. Okay. What do you think we should do next? Get everything in terms of, so what is this in terms of sine and cosine? Secant is 1 over cosine. So then this becomes negative sine squared over cosine squared. And what's sine divided by cosine? Hey, sine divided by cosine is tangent, and that's what we wanted. Yay. Okay. All right, let's look at another one. I think I want to go and do actually the last one. Do I want to do the last one? I want to do the last one. Do I want to do the last one? I definitely do want to do the last one. Let's do the last one just to make sure we get it. All right. So Mr. Lake said start with the less complicated side. Both of these sides are terrible. So when both are terrible, here's what you do. Start with every side you like, keep going until you get stuck. Then do the other side and see if you can meet them in the middle. So let's start with the left. I don't know. We've got a trig function squared, right? Let's use that. Trig function squared is cotangent squared. Let's see if we can find that one. So if 1 plus cotangent squared is cosecant, then if we subtract 1, cotangent squared was equal to cosecant squared minus 1. So I'm actually going to draw this down the left side. So again, the idea here is cotangent squared is equal to cosecant squared minus 1. So we can write that the cosecant squared of theta minus 1 plus cosecant theta. That's a Pythagorean identity. Okay, now let's use some of our algebra skills. This is a difference of squares, right? So I think we could factor this, and I believe one of the factors is the denominator. So I think if we factor this, we can simplify this even more. So this is a difference of squares, so it's cosecant plus 1, cosecant minus 1. And hey, look, are you seeing what I'm seeing? Those are the same thing, cosecant plus 1 and 1 plus cosecant, those are the same thing, so those will cancel. Which means all I'm left with is cosecant of theta minus 1. Okay, so I've gotten to there, and then how I can get from here to the answer there is kind of hard to see. So I think I'm going to pause here. Let's start working with the other side. For the other side, I think we could just divide these, right? 1 divided by sine would be the first term. And sine divided by sine is just 1. Yay? And actually, hey, I'm pretty close to meeting in the middle here. I've got the minus 1, but what is 1 over sine? Oh my gosh, thank you. Neither of these pictures is me. Just more student pictures. What's the point? All right, what is 1 over sine? It's the reciprocal of cosecant. So this is cosecant theta minus 1, and that's our reciprocal identity. Hey, and now we met in the middle. So those are the same. Yay. Okay. Let's have you finish off with this one. I will tell you, it'll probably, you might try doing a little mix of working with each side. But I'll tell you, you need to get everything in terms of sine and cosine. That's the key thing. Get everything in terms of sine and cosine first. All right. What's something we could do first? That'll be 1 over sine. Then what? Sure. Which is? Yay. So really, that's cosine squared then over sine. Okay. What do we try next? That would be the same as 1 minus sine squared, right? Hey, I think we're pretty close. We can get to our answer in 1 step now. Divide. 1 over sine, and sine squared divided by sine is sine. Okay, that's not the only way to do that one, but yeah, that works. The homework, by the way, is really short. I think it's 5 or 6 questions. Most of them are fill in the blank. There is one that you have to write out the whole thing yourself. It's pretty cool. It's not too bad of a one though. All right, well, I will see you all Monday. You have a good weekend. Goodbye.